Now, Marty Cannon is truly a man who needs no introduction. Marty's been on the forefront of the pro-life movement, defending case law, defending the legal rights of sidewalk advocates and common U.S. citizens in state legislation, recently in Iowa, crafting that legislation and bringing that legislation to an effective end, but also defending life when necessary. He's defended faithfully dozens of sidewalk advocates, but hundreds of others across the country in his work with the Thomas More Society. On the sidewalk, we know when our First Amendment rights are violated in the slightest way, Martin has our backs. He's available by phone at a moment's notice and works to defend life diplomatically behind the scenes in so many ways. Since 1998, the Thomas More Society has steadfastly preserved the rich heritage of American liberty. Their distinguished track record showcases an unwavering commitment to defending your fundamental rights to life, family, and freedom. Please welcome Senior Counsel with the Thomas More Society, Martin Cannon, Jr.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. I was chuckling a little bit. I think the first speaker said she brought up some notes in case she had a senior moment. I brought mine because there's no in case. So what a day it is, and thank God for it. You know, we've all spent something like 50 years getting together for these banquets around the anniversary of Roe. And it was somebody more creative than I am, maybe Aaron back there, who said, now we need to change and have them in June. I think that's brilliant. There was a year after Roe also. What a day that was. What were the plans? And who would have imagined a 50-year ordeal and all the blood for which we are responsible? You hear today, all the time, you've been hearing it for years, for 50 years, abortion is a states' rights issue. And of course it is. And I want to qualify that by saying it is to a point, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. We've been so focused on just trying to get some traction on the states' rights thing that there has been no discussion about a state's duty to protect life. We weren't near that one. We were just busy moving the ball that was farther down the field than that, or farther upfield maybe. But if New York and California, now that it's been returned to the states, want to utterly abandon unborn children, are we satisfied with that just because it's a state legislative prerogative? Of course not. If the state of California or the state of New York said, well, you know what, you can kill Jews, you just can't kill anyone else. You can kill Frenchmen, you can kill Muslims, you just can't kill anyone else. Or maybe it's a better way to put it is to say, you can't kill anyone, but if you want to kill any of those people, we're going to leave you alone to do it. At that point, the cry would be, government has a duty. It's in our foundation documents. The Declaration is not law, but it is guidance. And it sets forth the principles that were then put into action with the Constitution. And we say right in the Declaration, all men are created equal with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to protect these rights, governments are instituted among men. It is the purpose of government, all government, to protect life not to ignore it. So yes, it's a states' rights issue, but don't be distracted. We've got largely now more control over that. The time is to turn the attention to the question of a state's duty. And that's where it's important to consider the other thing. When people say, well, it's been returned to the states, now the battle will go on in 50 different places, and that's true. But it wasn't really returned to the states. It is returned to the legislatures, and that includes Congress. We don't have 50 battlefields, we have 51. And if the people of America can get dissatisfied with a patchwork of different abortion laws in the country, it is a proper function of our democratic republic to pass a nationwide law that protects all life. So what do we do now? You know, my father passed away 20 or 30 years ago, but I reminded of him all the time. And when people say, what do we do now that we've got the issue back in our court? I think of him laughing whenever he saw a dog chasing a car. He would always say to me, what's he going to do if he catches it? In order to address that question, we really need to step back a little and look at America for what it really is. When I sat down this morning to figure out what I was going to say here tonight, I found myself going places I'd never expected, and I'm not a theologian, so you'll have to decide or tell me if I'm off the rails here. And of course, July, my wife pointed out just today that the fact that we're having this celebration almost at the same time as our Independence Day celebration is a little bit interesting to me. I wonder if God had that in mind also. But in any event, what is America really? It starts off with theology. God created us for relationship. For that reason, He shared certain of His own attributes with us in small doses. We are not God. We are not little gods. We're not God at all. But He, for the sake of relationship, He shared with us His attributes. You can't have relationship with a turtle. You can only have relationship with someone like you. And the same is true with God. Sharing those attributes, He made us in His image and likeness. That's not redundant. He made us look like Him in some respects, and we are like Him in others. Our intellect, our need to, and our ability to communicate, our ability to think in abstractions, our consciences, even our ability to have relationship itself, separate us from all other creatures, even those of the highest order, by a chasm unbridgeable by any natural process. That's code for we didn't evolve. But God does not share more of His attributes with some of us than with others. We all share His attributes in the exact same degree. I believe exact. No matter what impairments we think we have, exact. And yet no individual can have all of God's attributes, even in small doses. The dizzying variety of gifts that we see across the human race is a reflection of all that God is. It separates us also, distinguishes us from the amazing sameness that we see in every other species. Despite our commonalities in the attributes God shares with us, every individual possesses a different mix of them, given differently so that God can have relationship differently. The individual, in his uniqueness, is valuable to God and is part of God's plan. That is our fundamental dignity. God wanted that relationship to be voluntary. He doesn't want robots. So he shared with us another attribute of his, and that is our free will. Combined with our individual gifts and affected by our faith, it cultivates honor, bravery, sacrifice, industry, creativity, prosperity, generosity. Ultimately, it results in the salvation of souls. That is our greatest strength. But with that free will comes the capacity to decline relationship, the capacity to sin, the capacity to commit atrocities. That is our great weakness. We cannot have one without the other. America is built around these very same ideas, serving God's design, ordained by God, blessed by God, because it advances the freedom of the individual, unleash the human mind, and protect its freedoms. And you get the American upstart that in a few generations rocketed past other civilizations, ancient, well-developed, and powerful, to become an economic, political, military, and moral force for good in the world. That is the greatness of America. But free as we are to detach ourselves from the source of our freedoms, we wander into darkness, kill 60 million of our own children, lead the rest of the world in doing the same thing. This is the weakness of America. Like the free man it is built around, America cannot have its strength without having this weakness. Active engagement by godly people is the only way to address it. This country began with 13 sovereign states agreeing to join for limited purposes and each retaining much of its autonomy. One state at the time could no more prohibit slavery in another than we could today in another foreign nation. But in order to have even an imperfect nation, they left each other alone on that issue. But they came together around a grand idea that put slavery on borrowed time. As social consciousness changed, the people acted upon the idea. It was messy, it was costly, it was tragic, it was successful. Decency prevailed over time. There was no substitute for organic activism among people free to engage in it, bringing to light a fundamental truth. Much the same is true here. Abortion was occurring, and states varied in their laws with respect to it. But the unborn child was not mentioned in the Constitution, and probably wasn't considered a person when the document used the term. But the idea is there. No person shall be deprived of life without due process. No person shall be denied equal protection under the law. As consciousness of the child's humanity and personhood gathers strength, We have to do the work. What do? Scripture is not a history we are reading as outside observers after the fact. It's an entirely coherent, perfectly structured, beginning to end account, nonfiction of the epic battle between God and Satan. Lightness and dark, truth and deception. Somewhere between Acts and Revelation, we are in it. The battle may even be in late stages and reaching a fever pitch. If you hate the Creator, go for His creation. Make an all-out assault on marriage, sexuality, family, freedom itself, and even His babies. Act upon that. All-out assault requires all-out defense. But remember who's in charge. Look back at the Odyssey of the Israelites. God was never not present. He preserved them as part of His merciful rescue of all who would have it. But as they went in and out of relationship with God, they went in and out of their power over heathen. By the way, the Odyssey is a heathen history, but it has remarkable parallels to the wanderings of the early Israelites and to modern America. I can still see clearly my father's handwriting, black felt tip marker on a yellow legal pad where he wrote, "Even after all the adventures, Odysseus still had to find Ithaca again. We must turn all the more, I know we have, but we must turn all the more back to God, and He will bless that. It's already happening. When Roe came down, half the country was horrified. But to those who don't live and breathe an issue, they get their cues about what's right and wrong from what is legal. Half of those who were horrified then are complacent now. How much worse should it be for 3 generations of American kids who have grown up knowing nothing but Roe? And yet, look at the March for Life in Washington, or the marches all around the country, or any of the pro-life gatherings around the country out on the sidewalks. 3/4 of the people easily are younger than Roe. The effect of legality has been matched by a message. It is the message of life. It is God's message. Our young people are His newest and His unsheepish messengers. We must lead them with our experience, empower them with our resources, join them in prayer, and follow them with our hearts. Remember, the battle is spiritual. Roe made up false thresholds like viability and trimester that have no more to do with the humanity of the child than a 4-inch trip through the birth canal. In a good faith effort to accomplish something by humanizing the child, we over years have done much the same thing, focusing on late-term abortion, fetal pain, heartbeat. And those are fine things to pay attention to, but we need to do post-Dobbs what we should have done post-Roe. Get our collective mind forcefully around the reality that conception really does mean a new and unique human being, already in God's image and worthy of our protection as anyone in this room. It should be easier because we have better understanding and better imagery, but it will be harder because we are more divided and the enemy is energized. That just reflects the fever pitch. The euphemisms have fallen away. The mask has come off. There's a fiendish frankness in what we hear these days. It's in our face. And while we mill about happily on our end of a so far mostly civil battlefield, an army of thugs is gathering at the other. But division is no excuse for weakness. Deception is Satan's only tool. Truth is one of God's many, and we must speak it. Independence Day is around the corner. The greatness of our blessed country will be on many minds, and it has shown up again here. The effect of evil in places of power is not new to man. The raw judicial despotism that gave us Roe is not limited to any one country. But the magnificent correction we've seen through years of prayer, endless advocacy, and the employment of the freedoms God has provided for us is uniquely American. God is not done with America. He'd have spared Sodom and Gomorrah for a few righteous men. America has millions. They are seeking his will and defending his design. He has stepped into our history lately in a big way. Take hope from it. Boldly speak truth. Don't back down. Seek his will. God will bless your efforts. Thank you.